You are now in the Backcourt, a Brooklyn Nets podcast presented by Ticketmaster. I'm Lucas Kaplan, writer for NetsDaily of Nets Film Focus. And joining me today, we have a special super sub from Yes Network. Not Sarah Kustok, but her play-by-play partner, Ryan Ruocco. Ryan, how are we doing?
I'm doing great, Lucas. I'm pumped to do this, man. What I want to compliment you because I started noticing your work over the last couple of years and reading your stuff, and I was like, dang, like Lucas like really knows the game. He breaks down such specific stuff. And I was talking to my dad about it, and I know I had met you prior to you doing all this, but I hadn't put two to two together completely right away. And my dad was like, like Lucas is Gary's son. My dad and Lucas's father go way back. They worked together at the USFL over 40 years ago. Both are big Nets fans, so shout out to them. Um, and are good friends. And anyway, so I'm glad now we get to make our fathers proud and do this pod together.
Definitely. The first time I met Ryan, the first time I saw him at a Nets game, I said, hey, it's been a while, but I'm Lucas. And my father says, hello, Gary Kaplan. And Ryan says, oh, of course. He was playing basketball with me in the backyard at some party when one of his coworkers went too hard and I broke my arm.
Yes. It was a USFL reunion.
Yes.
And we were playing. It was like, for me, like my peak basketball days. I was like 13.
Right.
And we were playing, or no, I must have been, I was 13. And we were playing in the backyard. And I remember Jay Wright was there too. And I was playing well, and I was like schooling these old guys. And one of the guys who was playing in the game literally just like smashed me into a fence and then stepped on my hand after, which like
90s basketball.
The stepping on my hand wasn't on purpose, but the shoving was, which when I think about it now, I'm like, what was that guy doing? I was 13 years old. But yeah, your dad was there. He was not the one who shoved.
To be clear, he was not the one who shoved me. Okay, good. I just wanted to clear that up.
Clear that up.
Yeah. So Ryan and I'm still in Boston. Last night, we're recording Wednesday morning. The Nets lost a close one to Boston. They've actually played 5 games since Sarah and I recorded last week. They had a couple games out in the Midwest against Cleveland and Chicago. Then they had a home back-to-back against Boston and Atlanta, which turned into a nice win, and lost another close one last night against Boston. So first, we got to talk about Cam Thomas, who is out for the season. He has another left hamstring injury. Sending all the best to Cam Thomas. He had 2 of my favorite performances of his season against Cleveland and Chicago before he was ruled out for the season. Against Cleveland, he was fantastic, especially in the first half, 27 points, 3 assists. And then against Chicago, I think he still was passing the ball really well. Teammates made a few more shots, ends up with 24 points, a career-high 10 assists, and 6 rebounds. So his first double-double. Ryan, what have you seen from, in the games you've called this season from Cam Thomas? And to me, I was all over his growth and just his flashes really as a playmaker in these last 2 games. So it's obviously very unfortunate his season had to end right after that with an injury. But taking that out of it, I thought it was an awesome week for Cam Thomas.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Because Cam is, like, we've known he could score from jump. Right. Mm-hmm. Like the way he scores, I'll never forget, obviously, a few years ago when all of a sudden, like, he's finally given some playing time after they lose some big pieces, and he's dropping 40 and, 3 straight games. And you're like, whoa, wait, that's like, not just anyone can do that. And, I think we've always known that. I think what I've liked first and foremost about the scoring is it has seemed to get more efficient. I think he has, he's become a better and better 3-point shooter. I think he's, gotten better and better on his drives, more efficient on his finishing. But then the parts of the game that you wondered about with him are like, okay, how about, like, does he have the ability to play make? And then, can he be adequate on the defensive end? because obviously you're going to need that to stay on the floor, and that's something Jordy's going to demand. And I think, we saw growth on the defensive end, and I think we saw exponential growth in the playmaking department. I mean, this guy having 10 assists it is like a really big deal. That
Yeah.
is, we're not talking about someone just, you know, becoming an adequate playmaker. That's really making a difference. And I think in that Cleveland game, we saw it too. Lucas, I did that game, like just like some great decisions where even in the paint, where like he could have gone up with it, but he makes that one extra like wraparound pass and gets a layup instead for his
Hmm.
teammate. I think those are the kind of things that entice you and excite you about Cam Thomas, because his scoring is a unique enough ability that he's always going to have a job in this league, right? But then when you see the playmaking, you think about how you might be able to function more holistically offensively, accessing his talent. Um, so I think, unfortunate with what's happened with his hamstring injuries this year, and obviously something the Nets are going to have to get a hold of, given that he, came back, got hurt, got hurt again,
Hmm.
with the same injuries each time. But I think his play on the floor definitely uh, a big building block this season.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned how he fits in to a offense, to a team holistically. I think last year the big thing was he started shooting above 40%, which he always had, really, always come near it on catch and shoot threes, but on real volume and hunting those shots and being a great threat off the ball and turning some of those into drives and playing off other creators. And then this year it was creating his own offense as well as, I think, a playmaking jump. You mentioned it, the Cleveland game. Like I said, he only ended up with 3 assists, but it felt like there were a ton of drives and plays where he sought out, a high level pass, and it just didn't end in a bucket for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Um, this year he ends averaging 24 points a game, 3.3 rebounds, 3.8 assists. Those are all career highs. So is his true shooting, 58%. That, as you mentioned, his efficiency going up. And again, all the passing numbers at career bests. His assist to usage ratio. The thing that I love, right, is that assisting the ball at career high rates, the turnovers have remained stagnant for him. They're pretty much where it was when he was in his first, second, third year. So all of these statistical indicators show you that he's on the right track. Obviously, he's a restricted free agent. Don't want to speculate too much on his future, but if he is indeed a Brooklyn Net next year, the team will be lucky to have him, and like, you trust that he is on the right path to keep growing. Do you have a favorite Cam Thomas memory moment from either this season or his rookie contract?
Was it was it this year where he had that shot? I think it was early in the year. He like there was kind of like a broken play, and the ball was like loose in the left corner, I feel like, and the shot clock was about to expire, and he just like quick all in one motion, like picked it up and like
Oh
got,
yes, I
shot it from the corner and nailed it. Like
I forget who they were playing, but
me
I know
too.
the
Me,
shot you're
the
talking
play I'm
about.
talking about. And I remember because Frank DeGrace, our incredible producer, got in my ear, and he was like, "That might be the shot of the year," because it was just like the play was so broken, and but it was so ridiculous how casually he was able to gather what looked like it was just going to be like a loose ball, either go out of bounds or be a shot clock violation, and he just like quick like across his body from like a tough angle, almost like behind the backboard ish in the corner. I think it was a three. Just like quick picks it up and like just shoots it. And I think like that's the thing. He has this unique ability to square himself and keep his center of gravity no matter what. Um, so that, and then also the Golden State game at Golden State, uh, just some like going on a little burner in that game
Mm-hmm.
where you're just like where he's just like pulling up left and right. Um, that game also, but I think from his rookie contract, remember the game he exploded against the Clippers when he first was getting
Yeah,
on
that
at
was.
Barclays?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And my wife was there with her colleagues just as a fan. And it's funny because my wife is not a big sports fan at all, but she'll like get into things. And then whenever she goes to a game, she's like, "This is so fun," whatever. And she
Yeah.
watched like big games, or we'll just like watch parts of my broadcast. But but she was at that game with her colleagues, and she was like, "This is awesome. Who's this Cam Thomas guy? Like, this is incredible." And I think he has that ability, right, to just like he plays and scores in such an exciting way that it can captivate you.
It was his first career start. He scored 47 points, which is
Yeah,
not bad. Not bad for
yeah.
your first career
Was that
start.
like a mid-February game?
Yeah, it was that stretch you're talking about, post
2 years ago.
2023 trade deadline. He
Yeah,
scores youngest player in NBA history to score 3 straight 40-point games.
yeah.
I don't want to say he's played his last game with the Nets, but, for his rookie contract going to free agency, you never know. He's had a lot of fun memories and games.
And here's what's interesting, Lucas. Like, trying to place him on, okay, what is he on a team that's, a really good playoff team, right? Like, is he somebody who's a just like consistent offensive option off the bench who's going to, be able to get you a bucket whenever you, need one?
Yeah.
Or is he someone who maybe can be more than that, who can be, someone who's really, drawing the attention of the defense and creating opportunities for his teammates, both with that attention and his playmaking, where he can function at an even higher level than that. And I think this year left enough intrigue that I don't think you can feel definitive one way or another. And to me, that's actually a victory.
Yeah, I agree. Especially because he only played 25 games. So to show that in like a third of the season. I really like that point because something I've been thinking about, the traditional sixth man role, bring him off the bench, let him cook, is not as prevalent in today's NBA because really it's like you have to fit with the best five. Like you look at these great teams, Celtics, Cleveland, OKC, even the Knicks, like they have probably 3 or 4 guys. The Knicks might be a bad example of this, but 3 or 4 guys that are going to close games, and then it's whoever is fitting in with the group that night, whoever is a good matchup. You look at OKC, Shea, Jalen Williams, Chet are on the floor to close. Pick any other 2 guys, have all close games for them. Casey Wallace, Wiggins, Hartenstein, Isaiah Joe, like Cam Thomas to continue getting better as he has this season shows he can fit in with a variety of players, attack a variety of coverages. We know he can pull up against drop. We know he can get into the lane and draw fouls. But to see more defensive attention, I'm really, intrigued and pleased with his season in that regard. So I think that was important for us to start with. This week, though, obviously, Brooklyn then played 3 games after that Midwest swing, the back-to-back at home, and then this road game in Boston. So what did you see from Brooklyn over this past week, especially the games you were in the house for? I know you were in the house for that Atlanta win and the game in Boston last night. What stood out to you, generally speaking?
I think one thing that we all have seen early on that has just continued is the kind of play and the heart and the grit and the aggression, and I think the confidence and will that Jordy has instilled. And I think, there's a lot that Sean Marks and the front office can feel great about this year. But I think the thing they should feel best about and ownership should feel best about is they hired the right head coach. Like, I mean, I think, if there's one thing universally that all Nets fans are going to agree upon this year, it's that this organization has the head coach it wants for the future to guide this franchise. And I think from Jordy, he has a great way about, setting a certain level of standard and demand, regardless of who you are. And we even have seen, D'Angelo Russell talk about this recently, and how he doesn't care, whether you're D'Lo, whether you're Cam Johnson, whether you're, Tosan Awoma, whoever you are, you're Maxwell Lewis. Like there's certain things that for him are going to be non-negotiable. And I think that we've seen those demands come out in the way this group plays. And so what stood out to me these last few games is like when these guys are on the floor, they don't ever play like they're at a talent deficit. They have a belief in themselves no matter who they're playing, and they play with a vigor and a peskiness that makes the opponent earn every win against them. And so whether you're talking about the game against Boston the other day, where they lose at home, but they have this incredible battle and fight down the stretch. Even after the Celtics had seemingly pulled away late in the fourth quarter, they still keep coming. They finish on a 12-3 run. They end up losing the game ultimately, but like something where you kind of feel good about the identity. Then the way they win against Atlanta. And I thought really interesting in that game, I was doing that game with Vince Carter, and he made the point about after Cam was upset with the call reversal on what would have been a 4-point play opportunity late in the second quarter. He kind of then was trying to force things, like clearly was still bothered. And Cam then talked about how the coaching staff kind of refocused him, like calmed him down, and then got him in a place where he was just like a beat slower and so effective down the stretch, scored 10 points in the fourth quarter at back-to-back huge threes, guides them to the win. I thought even that like emotional, the way the coaching staff was able to guide this vet who's been unbelievable this year for them emotionally through that was a good sign. And then the performance against Boston, you're playing at TD Garden. And I know they didn't have Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum, but like they still obviously have more talent on that floor than the Nets do at this given time. And the Nets still take the Celtics to the brink there, and are able to battle. And so I know it's kind of a general thing to say, but I think there's something rewarding about just seeing the way they battle translate either into wins or really competitive games where they come up short. And within that, the one other thing I'd say in this long-winded answer, Lucas, is I feel like the other thing that stood out to me is just like how many different guys
Yeah.
contributing positively in those games, right? Like you go across the board, whether it's Keon Johnson, whether it's Maxwell Lewis, whether it's, Zaire, whether it's Cam, so many different, Day'Ron Sharp with the 10 offensive rebounds and the, loss. Even like, how about Day'Ron in last night's game for the Celtics, comes up with the block, then starts the break, flares to the corner, and takes like an in-rhythm jump shot in the corner where his toes on the line. But like, every guy's doing something, I feel like, on a nightly basis where you're not like how often are you looking at someone on the floor and saying like, ugh, why is that guy out there? Like, I don't think it happens.
Last night they won a real stretch of minutes with all five guys, a hockey sub, so five reserves on the floor. It was Trendon Watford, Maxwell Lewis, Tyrese Martin, Day'Ron Sharp, and Noah Clowney. And those five were out there in the second quarter, typical bench time, and to start the fourth quarter, maybe Jalen Wilson got in there. I think at that time it was four of them, whatever. But they won their minutes. Jordy always always is big on just the up and down production across the board. And when you're throwing five reserves out there, a couple of guys who started this year on two ways or not on the team or playing real rotation minutes for the first time in their careers, it doesn't go overlooked, but it's a testament to the system that they have. What I loved about the Boston games is that the Nets played a really strong game in two totally different ways. In the first Boston game, they shoot 43.5% from three, balls popping, they're attacking Jason Tatum, doubling, being physical, spread out over the floor as we see, and Boston ends up shooting high 60s from two, playing two bigs at once. Nets don't have Nick Claxton in this one. Flash forward 3 days, you're in Boston, the threes aren't falling, you don't really have the same defensive game plan at all, and the Nets are playing a fantastic defensive game. They're there on every catch. I think they made the Celtics three-pointers considerably more difficult than we normally see. They're getting to the foul line, they're getting to the rim, and it's a low-scoring game where they don't shoot well from three. And I think that really, there's not one thing that they have to do well to win. Obviously, last night, I think they played well enough to win. I just don't think they made enough open shots. Obviously, I was in the arena. I couldn't listen to the broadcast, but I'm one, if you and Sarah had that takeaway from the game.
Yeah, I thought they played great. I thought, obviously the Porzingis post-ups are, they're the most difficult thing to guard in the NBA, and he had some key ones down the stretch. The Shireman minutes, swung the game for Boston, which is funny because you look at him and you're like, geez, he's not a part of the rotation normally, but he can help you, he looks good.
He can shoot.
Yeah, he could shoot, and he's confident and he brings an energy. But no, I think if you look at down the stretch, right? D'Lo, when he comes back in midway through the fourth, he hits a couple of shots and you're thinking he's going to go toe to toe. Then he ends up missing his final 6 threes. He misses 6 straight threes and he was kind of fortunate to get fouled on another one in the final 4 minutes, 43 seconds. Uh, and so, that was kind of like, if he hits 3 of those, right, it's a different stretch. Or maybe if
Hmm.
we thought they probably should have gotten Cam Johnson more looks down the stretch than they did.
Yeah.
But other than that, and maybe, there was like a silly foul here or there from Keon, I think.
Hmm.
But other than that, I think there was a ton to like about the way they played. One guy you mentioned that I continues to impress me is Trendon Watford.
Yeah.
Uh, I thought Richard had an interesting comparison when we were doing a game a few weeks ago. He said he reminds him a little bit of a Boris Diaw type.
Trendon said in the
Did
locker room
you
that,
ask him?
yeah, he didn't love it, but he said he was only familiar with late career Boris Diaw, and so he needs to go back and watch some film. But
Yeah.
in
Here's the thing.
general, yeah, tell us why that's a good
Yeah, like think
comparison.
about the game and not the body type, right? Because and younger Boris obviously was
Yeah,
not big as later Boris. But I think there's something, and Sarah did a great job of describing it last night. Like there's an unpredictability with his speeds, right? Like
hmm,
there's something about the way Watford drives that catches the opponents off guard, because he can slow it down, and he kind of meanders in an amoeba type way. And then there's other times where, like, all of a sudden that almost like lulls the defense to sleep, and he has like a quicker burst than you might
yeah,
realize, and I think he catches the opponents off guard. Plus, he has a pretty good finishing package then at the end of those drives. And I think the thing that's most comfortable, which Richard talked about and was excited about, and Jordy's mentioned a lot, was just how comfortable he is in the post
that too.
and his ability to go down there and make plays. So, again, like I think what I like is, from all of these guys, you're seeing things that you're like curious about, and I don't know that you can definitively say with any member of this Nets rotation, like, hey, like I know that guy is going to be a rotation member on a team that could contend for a title, right? Or I know that guy is definitively a part of the long-term answer. To be fair, I don't know that a lot of guys have definitively answered that, but I think what's important is, I don't know that anyone's eliminated themselves from that conversation. Like I haven't watched many guys this year and said, "Whoa, like he can't play," or like he definitely is not a part of the answer. And to me, that's very significant. The improvement within the season, the improvement year to year, the contributions on the floor from Keon, from Zaire, from Trendon, from Noah, who I think everyone should be very excited about. From Tosan Awoma, who I really like, and I like his size. Some of the other guys as well. Like, I think it all leaves us curious and wanting to find out more. And that in itself, to me, feels like a positive thing.
Definitely. And I think for a lot of guys, establishing themselves as potential playoff pieces is a big step forward for them. Trendon in his last 2 games against Atlanta, he shoots 4 for 8, 13 points, 5 assists off the bench. And then against Boston, he shoots, let me find it, 5 of 9, 11 points, 4 assists. So backup point guard, really. But it looks different for him than a lot of guys. And I love that he can post up, he can play in the short roll. He can attack from the perimeter. I think obviously he has to work on mastering. Nobody ever masters it, but mastering and refining all those parts of his game. But I do like the way he can create offense in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
Like you put, in the first half, they had Baylor Shireman on him for a few possessions. And I know Shireman ends up really winning the game for him with his 3-point shooting in the second half, but it's a reserve versus reserve unit. They put Shireman on Trendon Wofford, and it's like, you probably shouldn't do that because he's
Yeah.
going right to the post, and he scored or assisted on a few possessions. I think he's gotten better passing the ball this season, looking for Dayron, looking for guys inside on the lob. So they have a lot of funky guys. They have a lot of unorthodox guys, like Tosan's one of them you mentioned. And I've really enjoyed watching them.
Me too, man. I'm curious about Tosan. Tosan's a dude who I'm legitimately interested in and curious about. I know they've run up against his number of games that he could play, but
Yeah.
like he's 6'8". He makes a lot of winning plays. Um, there's enough offense there to make me curious. And he plays with an incredible motor,
Yep.
in intellect as well. Uh, I he's a guy I'm curious about. And I think one thing we've very consistently seen with this front office, obviously, is they've the ability to develop players, to find reclamation projects, so to speak, and continue to develop guys who maybe have been overlooked or been 3 or 4 stops or whatever it might be, but then also to draft successfully in the 20s, and in the 30s, even. When
Yeah.
you look at a Dayron Sharp, look at a Claxton, look at a Clowney, just to name a few. Um, and so all of that makes me excited, especially thinking about the possibility of next year having 4 picks in the first round and like developing a core and knowing, even if you're not getting, a franchise changers, maybe you're getting a core of useful rotation players that will develop and be fun to watch. I think, and playing this brand, um, yeah, it just makes me excited about what's to come and the style they play. Because I think you and I were talking about it a little bit last night, Lucas. One thing they've consistently done has been a good watch this entire season. Like they really have. They maybe had like one stretch where they had a few games where they got smacked around a little bit, but otherwise they've been competitive night in, night out.
It's been really fun to watch. I saw post game last night, waiting outside the locker room. I saw Brad Stevens bump into Jordy Fernandez in the hallway, and I don't want to say too much about a private conversation, but I can tell you Brad said, "Hey man, like hell of a job.
Yeah.
Very fun to watch." He used those
Yeah.
words. And so people around the league are taking notice. I've really enjoyed this season more than what you might say just looking at the record because of the way they compete. To circle back, Ryan's talking about Tosan Awoma's two-way contract games limit. A guy on a two-way contract can only play a certain number of games in the NBA over a season. Tosan's nearing his limit, but Jordy has said, we'll see him down the stretch this season. So I'm excited for him to return. One guy I want to touch on before we wrap up is Maxwell Lewis. For those of you who listened to last week's episode, Maxwell Lewis at that point had never played double-digit minutes in an NBA game. He had obviously never scored double-digit points in an NBA game. And then he is thrown into the rotation against the Boston Celtics with Tatum and Brown over the weekend. Nets had a few injuries. He scores 8 points in 2 minutes. The place is going crazy. He ends up scoring 15 points off the bench on 6 of 7 shooting. He made 3 threes. Then he earns himself another 22 minutes against the Hawks the next day. 13 points, 4 of 8 shooting. Ends up a couple steals, a couple fast break dunks. And the thing that stood out most, and I wrote an article about this on NetsDaily, his teammates seemed to love him. They were going crazy on the bench. I think he's just, yet again, I mean, we were going crazy when Tyrese Martin put up a 30-piece in Phoenix. Like, whoa, who's this guy? Where'd he come from? 6 months later, the Nets are still like doing this and finding these guys. I enjoyed the Maxwell Lewis experience this week. I know he didn't shoot it super great last night in Boston. I think he missed a couple threes, but energy, size, I really liked him this week.
Speed too,
Yeah.
I think some speed. I agree, man, and I'm glad he brought up Tyrese too, because he's another guy who I've been impressed with this year, and his
Driving to the basket.
his
Yeah.
driving ability. I thought of him just as a shooter before, and then you realize, oh no, he's got driving ability,
Yeah.
playmaking ability. But yeah, with Lewis, what I think was so interesting is in both that first Boston game and the Atlanta game, you felt him on the floor.
Yeah.
Like, he was impacting winning. He was injecting life. He was making an impact both offensively and defensively. I thought he totally changed the game. Obviously, he almost changed the result against Boston, but then I thought he changed the game against Atlanta. I thought when he came into the game, when they needed it most after Atlanta had kind of gone on a run, taking a lead, he gave them great minutes of defensive energy, of a couple big shots, playing with a verve, and again, like you said, size as well. Another guy that you're left to say, like, hey, like, I'm curious. Like,
Yeah.
David Cohn, one of my favorite people in the world, one of my favorite analysts to work with, he'll always say, like, makes you want to see more, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that that's an important compliment to throw out. You know, I don't think it's appropriate to say definitively, like I was saying before. Like, I think if you're saying right now, like, I know Maxwell Lewis is absolutely, a rotation piece on an amazing team. Like, we don't have enough evidence for that yet. Like,
Right.
that wouldn't be fair. But do I want to see more? Yeah, I
And
do.
that's how you earn contracts.
Yeah,
That's how you keep
exactly.
getting, and these guys trying to establish themselves. All you have to do is, enough intrigue to see more.
Yes. Yeah.
I have a great quote from D'Angelo Russell in this story I just want to read. And I was asking them, you guys are going crazy for Max on the bench. Clearly, he has this great energy. Why is that? And he mentioned his work ethic first. He said, quote, I think as a young player in the league, if you don't have the work ethic, you get stereotyped as a guy that just is too fun, too crazy. But if you have the work ethic, I think it's easy for you to fall into being who you are. And that was a great quote to me because when you're in the locker room, when you're at shoot around, this team is loud. No matter the result, they are together. Like there's an energy in the building whenever they walk in. They believe in themselves. It's a close-knit team. And every guy seems comfortable being themselves. And one of the most tightly knit Nets groups I can remember watching the team in that regard. I don't know if you agree.
I think so. I definitely do. I definitely do, Lucas. And I had this is a kind of a big picture
Hmm.
perspective, but like I had someone very, very, very high up in the NBA world say to me once, how many teams are there in the NBA? And I said 30.
30.
And then so he said, so on average, each team should win once out of every 30 years a
Yeah,
championship, right? Like on average. So that would mean there's 29 years out of every 30 years where you're not
gonna
winning a
win.
championship. You better have other ways to, you know, become connected to your fan base, to give people a reason to want to watch, to have something that feels like success. If your only bar organizationally in professional sports is championship or not, you're going to have a lot of fruitless journeys. And I think that one thing I like about what's happening right now, no, make no mistake about it. The goal is always to win a championship. Everything you do is building towards that goal. But there are ways to really enjoy the journey, as you're trying to build to that and to understand that something can look and feel like success along the way to trying to achieve that, or even if you don't achieve that. And I think what I like is, you're going to have 82 games a year with your team when you're an NBA fan. You want to feel like you like the guys you're rooting for, that there's a cohesion, there's a connectiveness. They play a style that feels, emblematic of, how you feel about your city. And I feel like this team has done that. And there's not much more you could ask for this year, given the net circumstances. And I think it also is the right foundation to set for Jordy moving forward.
And maybe a couple Lakers and Bulls teams, a couple aside, every championship NBA team has loved playing together and had fun and expressed joy on the court. So there's steps to doing that. You got to be on the right path. And I think they are. Flexibility, moving forward, trust Sean Marks, all that. But it starts here.
Yeah, exactly. Like talent is obviously a prerequisite. With being like, you're not gonna, you know, if you're the best of friends and you don't have top tier talent, you're
Of
not
course, yeah.
winning a championship. But you need that level of connectivity and cohesion. Like even just look at the Cavs. Think about how much more connected they are this year. How much more
Uh-huh.
cohesive. And look, the results are speaking for themselves, even though they had that same talent a year ago, essentially. So um, yeah, I think I think it's so big. And then when you tune into a game as a fan, you want to feel like, you're proud of the product you're watching and you're enjoying the way the guys play. And I think, for this year, that's so important because it establishes a foundation for what you can expect now from these Nets under Jordy Fernandez, regardless of who's in the jersey, right? And of course, you
Hmm.
hope that as time goes on, you're going to accumulate more and more talent while continuing to hold those principles and grow them. And so I think that's been a real win this year for the Nets.
I think that's 100% true. I think that's a great place to leave off. I think it is now time for a special guest edition of trivia, which we always wrap up the backcourt, is Ryan, do you know the first? I had to dig for this. You would be impressed by my PI skills. Do you know the
Okay.
first Nets on Yes game that you broadcasted?
I do.
What was it?
It was Nets against the Pistons. It was in there. It was in the 12-win season in the 09-10 season. I think it was in March of 2010. And at the time, Brook Lopez scored what was then a career high. I think he had 38 points in the game, and it was one of their 12 wins that season.
Were you working for? Was that WFUV? Is that Fordham?
No, that was for Yes. That was my first Nets on Yes game that I did doing play-by-play for the Yes Network.
Wow, that's a fantastic memory. It indeed. Brook Lopez, I'm looking right now, had 25. Yeah. So you were 2 off.
Wait, how many did he have?
He had, oh man, we might need to cut this. Man, I got the wrong information.
Wait, what did you have?
I looked at all they all said your first year with Yes was 2011, 2012.
So I can explain it. You don't need to cut it. I can explain why.
Oh, I thought I got totally okay.
No,
please.
The reason is because the 11-12 season is the first year that I was officially Ian's backup.
Okay.
So what happened was, this is good because it gives a story. In the 09-10 season, they gave me one game. It was just like, hey, we're going to have you do one game. And my boss, John Filippelli, who's one of the great TV guys of all time, he did something really wonderful. He said to me, I want you to understand something. You get this opportunity. I remember I was at the production meeting. He called Frank, and Frank handed me the phone. He said, no matter what you do today, you are going to get more opportunities. So don't think of this as an audition.
Okay.
And it just calmed me completely, and it allowed me to just do my thing. So I did one game at the end of 2010. Then in the 10-11 season, I did 4 games. And then the next year, 11-12 is the first year that I was actually officially the number 2 with Ian, and I would do whatever games Ian couldn't do. And then it took off from there. So that was like my official start. But I'm looking up right now.
That's fantastic. I have it right here. Yeah. That is so right. Brook Lopez, 37-10. It was a March game against the Pistons.
Yeah.
Do you want? Okay. I guess adjust the question. How many of the Nets starters you think you can name in that game? Because that was going to be my original question. You got Brook.
My gosh. That is such a good question.
Always great to name some guys.
Oh my gosh. Is Rafer Alston on that team?
No.
Okay. Let's see. Courtney Lee.
Yes.
Okay.
There's an easier one next to him in the backcourt.
Ooh, next to Lee in the backcourt?
Yeah, at the point.
Oh, Devin Harris.
Correct. Okay.
Brook Lopez, Courtney Lee, Devin Harris.
These last 2 are going to be tough.
Dien Lien?
Correct.
Okay.
Oh, you got one left. It's the hardest one. Wow, this is a fantastic performance so far.
What's funny is I remember the first years of Brooklyn, is when I started doing way more games.
Right.
So remember all those teams so much more. And I got the Reggie Evans days.
Of course, me too.
Who was the other starter? Was Humphreys with them yet?
Yeah, but he came off the bench. So
okay. Jarvis Hayes?
Yes, Jarvis Hayes. Wow.
Let's go.
Heat check. Terrence Williams, Keon Dooling, and CDR, Chris Douglas Roberts, rounded out the rotation. But yes, Jarvis Hayes got the start.
Wow.
The Nets won 118-110, probably their best offensive game of the year, looking at it, in that 12-win season.
How about that?
Wow, that's awesome.
It's so funny, man, because I remember there was someone on the Pistons, too, who, I'm prepping this game. It's one NBA game, right?
Yeah.
I prepped for 6 weeks. Okay. I'm 23 years old. I'm getting to do my first NBA game. And and I'm working with Fratello. And I had this story about somebody on the Piston. Who was the Piston starters, and how he loved to like collect old cars. And I remember I was just hoping he would get to the free throw line so I could use the story with Fratello.
It was Jason Maxiel, Rip Hamilton, Jonas Jerebko, rookie Jonas Jerebko,
Oh wow.
Will Bynum, and Tayshaun Prince, and then they had a bunch of guys off the bench.
Who was the first guy you mentioned?
Jason Maxiel.
I think that my story was about Jason Maxiel. I think it was. Like, so, but yeah, man, that was my first taste. I wasn't officially a member of Nets on Yes yet. But then the third year I did games, which is the year you were referencing, 11-12 was the first year where I really did a big slate of games.
Can't trust Google, man. Can't trust Google.
Now, was Jordan Farmar on that 11-12 team?
Oh, I want to say yes, because he was he's definitely in Jersey, and I think he did back up Darren Williams. I love Jordan Farmar.
Yeah.
I had a strong liking to him for some reason. He played 2 years with the Nets. That was one of them. Okay. And you're right about Jason Maxiel. I just looked it up.
Yeah.
Maxiel's gas guzzlers, and there's a whole article about.
There you go.
Guys. There you go.
See?
Dude.
I clearly did my prep for that game.
And I think you did your prep for this pod. I think you had an equally successful debut on the backcourt as you did in that game.
Thank you, Lucas. I appreciate it, man.
We covered a lot of ground. Shout out to our fathers who.
Yeah,
dude. Shout out to them.
Gary and Peter.
Shout out to Gary and Peter. Shout out to the USFL. Very fascinating story. It's a great documentary their friend worked on, Mike Tolan.
Yes.
Original ESPN 30 for 30 documentary, Who Killed the USFL. Great documentary. But shout out to the Nets. They've been fun to watch. Shout out to Jason Maxiel for some reason. We got all the way there. We covered a lot of ground today.
Yes.
And once again, dude, thank you for coming on.
Hey, anytime, Lucas. I'm so proud of you and the work you're doing, man. Keep it up. Nets fans are lucky to have the really detailed, focused, specific, intelligent work you do. And looking forward to continuing to read all your stuff on NetsDaily and listen to you here, man.
I appreciate that a lot, Ryan. This has been the Backcourt, presented by Ticketmaster, a Brooklyn Nets podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much to Ryan for stopping by. Like, subscribe, rate it, whatever your podcast platform does. We appreciate it. And we will see you next week.